History isn't a static line drawn on a map. It's a shifting boundary, forged in the spaces where civilizations meet, clash, and blur together. From the bustling merchant ports of Tyre and the towering battlements of Carthage, to the cryptic whispers of the Delphic Oracle and the bloody waters of the Peloponnesian War, this is where the known world met the unknown. Welcome to Frontiers of Antiquity. Join us as we look beneath the surface of the classical world to uncover the human rivalries, the structural conflicts, and the ancient histories that built our modern world.
Imagine for just a second that you've just survived the end of the world.
Right, like a total apocalyptic scenario.
Exactly. A terrifying, cataclysmic global flood has just engulfed the entire planet. It wiped out your neighbors, your city, your culture. Like, almost everything you have ever known is just gone.
Just completely washed away.
Right. And now the waters are finally, they're starting to recede.
Okay.
So you step out of whatever tiny boat or vessel kept you alive, and you step onto this devastated, muddy earth.
I can picture it. It's bleak.
It's so bleak, and you look up at the heavens, trembling, and you ask the gods, like, why? Why did you destroy humanity?
You'd want answers, obviously.
Of course. You're thinking, was it our profound moral corruption? Did we sin so deeply that we brought this upon ourselves?
Which is what we would naturally assume today.
Right. But the gods just look down at you, maybe, rubbing their temples, and they basically say, no, it wasn't your morals. You guys were just being way too loud, and we were trying to get some sleep.
I mean, it sounds like a literal punchline, doesn't it?
It really does. It sounds like a joke.
But that is the literal plot of one of the oldest recorded narratives in human history.
A literal noise complaint. I still can't wrap my head around it.
It completely shatters our modern expectations, of how the divine is supposed to interact with humanity.
Yeah, because we're so conditioned today to expect these grand moral arcs.
Exactly. We expect that the gods judge us based on the purity of our hearts or the righteousness of our actions.
But in the ancient world, the ultimate cosmic catastrophe was triggered by something as mundane as a noise complaint.
Yeah. And to really grasp the gravity of this for our deep dive today, we have to establish this massive paradigm shift.
Right, because we are going to explore the shocking, almost terrifying indifference of ancient gods toward humanity.
We really have to look at why ancient humans spent their entire lives worshiping deities who viewed them as, annoying manual laborers.
Or collateral damage. Or even utterly irrelevant.
Yeah. Because when someone says the word religion today, the immediate associations are usually, divine love, personal salvation.
And most importantly, correct belief, right?
Yes. The idea that you must hold the right doctrines in your private heart.
Which in historical terms, we call orthodoxy.
Exactly. Orthodoxy. It comes from the Greek roots, orthos, meaning correct or straight.
Okay.
And doxa, meaning belief or opinion. So correct belief.
But the wild thing is, this assumption is actually a relatively recent invention, isn't it?
It is. For the vast majority of human existence, religion had absolutely nothing to do with moral affection.
Or what you secretly believed in your own mind.
Right. It was all about avoiding cosmic disaster through strict transactional action.
Which is orthopraxy.
Right.
Orthos meaning correct, and praxis meaning action. Correct action.
Correct action versus correct belief.
So, to give you an analogy to hold on to as we explore this, if modern religion is often framed like a loving marriage where your internal feelings really matter.
Hey, your emotional devotion to your partner.
Right. If modern religion is a marriage, ancient religion was a brutal, non-negotiable labor contract with a highly volatile boss.
That is the perfect way to put it.
Because your boss doesn't care if you love him in your heart.
No. He doesn't care if you feel spiritually fulfilled by your tasks either.
Your boss just wants you to clock in, do the heavy lifting, and, not make too much noise while he's in his office.
And if we want to see where that labor contract was first drafted, we really have to go back to the cradle of civilization.
Right. We need to look at ancient Mesopotamia.
Yeah, situated in the region that is present-day Iraq.
Specifically, we're talking about the alluvial plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, right?
Exactly. We're looking at ancient cities like Nippur, which is in modern-day Nufar, Iraq.
Okay.
Or Babylon, which is modern Hilla.
Now, I always picture that region as incredibly fertile, the Fertile Crescent.
Sure.
But at the same time, it's a place that is just baking under the sun. It's intense heat and mud.
It is extreme heat, dense mud, and honestly, profound ecological terror. What's crucial to understand about historical theology is how geography directly dictates how people imagine the divine.
Oh, that makes sense. Like, the environment shapes the religion.
Exactly. So if you look at Egypt, the Nile River floods predictably, gently.
Right. It brings life in a very rhythmic, manageable way.
Consequently, their gods were often seen as maintainers of eternal order.
But the rivers in southern Iraq, the Tigris and Euphrates, they aren't like that.
No, they're violent. They're incredibly erratic.
They just flood without warning.
Yes, sweeping away entire mud brick villages, drowning the livestock.
Yeah, and then they retreat, leaving behind these scorching, arid droughts.
So the environment itself was fundamentally hostile and unpredictable.
So because the people living there experienced nature as violent and unpredictable and easily agitated.
Imagine the forces controlling nature in exactly the same way.
Right. This ecological instability directly birthed a theology of volatile, hungry, and burdened deities.
The gods weren't serene figures floating on clouds. They were stressed out.
They were exhausted.
Extremely exhausted.
That's such a fascinating dynamic. You rarely hear the word burdened applied to an almighty god.
But they were deeply burdened. We see this perfectly preserved in two major epic poems from the region.
Okay, what are they?
There's the Babylonian creation epic called the Enuma Elish, which dates to around 1750 BCE.
And there's an even older one too, right?
Yeah, an Akkadian poem called the Epic of Atrahasis from roughly 1800 BCE.
And if we dive into the Atrahasis, the story does not begin with a majestic, peaceful cosmos waiting for humanity.
Not at all. It begins with a divine labor strike.
A labor strike. The gods literally formed a union and walked off the job.
In a very real sense, yes. The cosmos in this text was divided into two tiers of deities.
Okay, so a hierarchy.
Right. You had the senior gods, known as the Anunnaki. Think of them as the upper management, the executives.
And then you had the junior gods, the Igigi.
The working class.
Because before human beings even existed, the universe still required physical maintenance.
Rivers needed to be dredged. Canals needed to be dug to manage those erratic floodwaters.
Agriculture needed to be overseen.
And the senior gods forced the junior gods to do all this back-breaking manual labor.
The text describes them digging the Tigris and Euphrates riverbeds by hand.
Yes, sweating and groaning under the toil.
And eventually, the workers just break. They just can't take the physical toll anymore.
Exactly. The Igigis have had enough. They literally burn their shovels and pickaxes.
Oh, wow. They actually destroy their tools.
Yes, and they march on the grand temple as the supreme god and demand relief from this excruciating toil.
They surround his house in the middle of the night. It is a full-blown cosmic mutiny.
So the executives are facing a complete halt in cosmic production.
Right, because if the canals aren't dredged, the rivers flood and the cosmic order collapses.
Exactly. So how do they solve this without doing the work themselves? They need a surrogate laborer to take the burden off the junior gods.
So the god of wisdom, Enki, also known as Ea, teams up with the mother goddess Nintu.
And they devise this grotesque but highly practical solution.
Oh, this part is so dark.
It really is. They take one of the rebel junior gods who incited the strike, a deity named Iluwela, and they execute him.
They just slaughter him.
Yeah. They take his divine flesh and his blood and they mix it with the muddy clay of the earth.
And out of this muddy, bloody mixture, they fashion the very first human being,
which they called a Lullu.
I remember reading the translation of that word Lullu, and the epic is incredibly blunt about why this creature was made.
Very blunt.
It translates to something like surrogate or worker.
The text literally says, "Let him bear the yoke. Man carry the toil of the gods."
This is what scholars call the labor paradigm, right?
Yes. And I want to pause here because the implications of this are staggering compared to how we think today.
Yeah, it's completely alien to modern thought.
Humans were not created as the pinnacle of a loving universe. We were not created in the image of a perfect God to have a moral relationship.
We were manufactured as a biological machine.
A surrogate workforce designed specifically to carry the heavy lifting for a group of exhausted managers.
So our entire purpose was to do the farming, dig the ditches.
And most importantly, harvest the food to feed the gods through constant temple sacrifices.
Because if humans stopped working, the gods would literally starve.
They would.
So humanity was essentially created as a biological Roomba.
A biological Roomba is a great way to visualize it.
The gods bought an appliance to clean the house and cook the meals so they could sit back and relax.
You plug it in, you let it do the dirty work, and you generally ignore it.
Right. You don't have a deep emotional connection to your vacuum cleaner.
Exactly. You only pay attention to it when it starts malfunctioning or getting in your way.
Which brings us right back to the hook of this whole conversation.
Because what do humans naturally do?
We reproduce. We multiply.
And as you get more and more of these biological Roombas running around the Mesopotamian plains doing a work,
They inevitably start making a lot of noise.
yes, the specific Akkadian word used in the text is Hubūru. It translates precisely to noise, uproar, or clamor.
So humanity multiplied, and their collective Hubūru became deafening.
And the supreme god, Enlil, the manager who already had a notoriously short temper, was trying to get some sleep in his temple.
But the humans were just too loud.
The text reads, "The noise of mankind has become too intense for me. With their uproar, I am deprived of sleep."
So to cure his insomnia, he decides the only logical solution is to exterminate the human race.
It is just cosmic pettiness on a scale that is almost funny if it weren't so grim.
It really is. He doesn't look down and say, look at how wicked they are murdering each other, they're stealing.
No, he just says, "Keep it down, I'm trying to nap."
So he sends plagues.
And when the plagues don't quiet things down enough, he sends famines.
And when they're still making too much noise, he unleashes the deluge.
A massive, world-ending flood to just wipe the slate clean and finally get some peace and quiet.
But Enlil's anger blinded him to the fundamental flaw in the god's plan, didn't it?
It did. And this circles back to their total dependency on humans.
Right, because they send the flood and almost all of humanity is wiped out, save for one man, Atrahasis.
You might know him as Utnapishtim in the later Epic of Gilgamesh.
Atrahasis was secretly warned by the god Enki to build a large boat and save the animals.
But while the flood is raging, the gods are huddled together in the higher heavens, and they suddenly realize they have made a terrible miscalculation.
Because by wiping out their workforce, they have completely wiped out their food supply.
There is no one left to harvest the grain. There is no one left to burn the sacrifices.
So the gods are up in the heavens, shivering, terrified of the flood waters they unleashed, and absolutely starving.
They smash their Roomba in a fit of rage. And now the house is a mess and there's no dinner.
Wow. And when the flood waters finally recede, Atrahasis steps off his boat and immediately does what a good worker is supposed to do, right?
He offers a sacrifice. He roasts meat over a fire.
And the poem provides one of the most striking, pathetic images of the gods in all of ancient literature.
It says, "The starving gods smelled the sweet savor and gathered like flies over the sacrifice."
Swarming like flies, that is a deeply unflattering description of the divine.
Highly unflattering.
You don't call the almighty creator a fly unless you want to emphasize how desperate and driven by base appetite they are.
It is unflattering, but it perfectly encapsulates the Mesopotamian view of the divine-human relationship.
It was a relationship marked by utility, nuisance, and dependency.
The gods did not feel compassion for us. They just needed us to cook their meals.
And humanity didn't love the gods. We just fed them so they wouldn't drown us in a fit of irritation. Okay, so that is the brutal, muddy reality of ancient Iraq.
The gods are exhausted, irritable managers, and we are the reluctant laborers holding the system together.
But I have to imagine this labor dynamic didn't hold true everywhere.
No, it shifts dramatically depending on where you go.
Like, if we travel west, away from the mud and servitude of the Near East, toward the Aegean Basin.
Entering archaic and classical Greece, roughly between 750 and 400 BCE.
Picture the region of the Trojan War, the city of Troy, which is located in modern-day Hizarlik, Turkey.
Or the Greek mainland, places like Mycenae in the modern Peloponnese region.
Here, the vibe of the gods completely changes, right? They aren't exhausted managers digging canals.
Not at all. As we move into the world of Homer, into the Iliad and the Theogony of Hesiod.
The deities undergo a radical transformation in how they are perceived by their worshippers.
The Greek gods don't live in the mud. They live at the summit of Mount Olympus.
They are eternally youthful, absurdly beautiful, and most importantly, they are sustained by divine ambrosia and nectar.
They are immortal aristocrats.
Okay.
And because they cannot die, and because they don't have the same physical, desperate need for human labor to prevent their starvation.
Their indifference toward humanity takes on a completely different flavor.
It shifts from the irritation of a tired manager to the profound indifference of the vain and the privileged.
So if the Mesopotamian gods saw us as annoying appliances that they occasionally needed, how did the Greek gods view us?
In the Homeric epics, mortals are frequently referred to as brotoi, which translates directly to the dying ones.
Or sometimes ephemeroi, meaning creatures of a day.
Yeah. To the Olympian gods, human beings are essentially mayflies.
We are incredibly fragile, our lifespans are a blink of an eye, and ultimately our individual struggles are insignificant.
We are not a necessary workforce. We are just incidental playthings.
We are pawns to be used in their celestial rivalries.
Which is really the overarching plot of the Trojan War, isn't it?
Totally. The mortals think they are fighting for honor and survival, but the war is just a giant chessboard for the gods to settle their petty squabbles.
The gods intervene in the brutal hand-to-hand combat on the plains of Troy, but they don't do it out of a sense of moral justice.
They do it out of vanity, personal grudges, and familial alliances.
Like Aphrodite. She favors the Trojans purely because the Trojan prince, Paris, declared her the most beautiful goddess.
And Hera and Athena actively hate the Trojans and want to see their city burn because they lost that same beauty contest.
You have humans being slaughtered, their cities burning to the ground, their families sold into slavery.
And it is entirely collateral damage in an Olympian beauty pageant.
It's terrifying when you think about it.
There is this one specific visual from the Iliad that has always haunted me, and I think it perfectly captures this terrifying detachment.
Oh, I think I know which one you mean.
The great Greek warrior Achilles is finally about to fight the Trojan hero Hector. It is the absolute climax of the war.
Hector is running for his life outside the walls of Troy. Achilles is chasing him down like a predator.
Down on the ground, it is absolute desperate human agony. Hector's parents are watching from the walls, weeping.
And up on Mount Olympus, what is Zeus doing?
Right. What is he doing?
Zeus pulls out the Charistasia. These are the golden scales of destiny.
He takes two fates of death, one representing Achilles, one representing Hector, and he places them on the scales.
To see which one is heavier, which man is doomed to die that day.
And he performs this action with absolute chilling, emotional detachment.
He is not judging their moral character. He's not weighing their sins.
He is basically just checking the cosmic weather to see which way the wind is blowing.
Hector's side of the scale sinks down toward the underworld, and Zeus just nods. That's it.
Hector's fate is sealed.
The gods watch mortals suffer horrific, agonizing deaths. And then they literally turn around, walk back to their banquet halls, drink wine, and laugh with each other.
The contrast between human devastation and divine bliss is intentionally stark.
It is completely chilling.
But I know it goes deeper than just ignoring us or using us as pawns. In classical Greek thought, they actually viewed human happiness as a threat.
Yes, and this is a fascinating psychological insight into the ancient Greek mind.
If a Mesopotamian god hated your noise, a Greek god actively hated your success.
The concept is called phthonos theon, which translates to divine envy.
Divine envy.
This concept is heavily preserved in the histories of Herodotus, who wrote around the 5th century BCE.
And in the great Attic tragedies of playwrights like Aeschylus and Sophocles.
The ancient Greeks believed that the gods actively resented human overachievement.
If you were too successful, too rich, too happy, or too beautiful, you were stepping out of your lane.
You were blurring the boundary between the brotoi, the dying ones, and the immortals.
You were threatening the cosmic hierarchy just by thriving.
Exactly. The gods guarded that hierarchy jealously.
So if a mortal rose too high, the gods would actively conspire to bring them down.
And they had a very specific, almost insidious mechanism for doing this.
They wouldn't just strike you with a lightning bolt out of a clear blue sky, would they?
No. Instead, they would send a force called Eight.
Eight. How does that work? Is it like a spirit? A curse?
Eight translates to blind delusion or ruinous folly.
It was sometimes personified as a goddess, but it functioned as a psychological poison.
The gods would essentially cloud your judgment. They would trick you into a state of hubris.
Now, we use the word hubris today just to mean arrogance.
But in the ancient Greek context, hubris meant excessive pride that leads to dangerous overreach.
Like violating the natural order, thinking you were untouchable like a god.
So the sequence goes like this. You become highly successful. The gods get jealous.
They infect your mind with delusional folly, which is ateide.
This delusion causes you to act with supreme arrogance or hubris.
You make a terrible, arrogant mistake, which then inevitably leads to your total, catastrophic ruin.
The gods engineered your downfall from the inside out just to put you back in your miserable, mortal place.
Let me make sure I'm fully grasping the cruelty of this.
Sure.
If I am a miserable, impoverished peasant in ancient Greece, the gods ignore me because I am an insignificant pawn. But if I work incredibly hard, build a great life, and become wildly successful and happy, the gods will look down, become actively jealous of my happiness, scramble my brain so I make a fatal mistake, and orchestrate the destruction of my entire life just to prove a point.
That is the tragic reality of the classical worldview.
Wow.
To be human is to be caught in an unwinnable game. If you suffer, you are ignored. If you thrive, you become a target.
But hang on, let me push back on this a bit.
Go for it.
If the gods are this incredibly petty and they are just constantly messing with humans out of jealousy, aren't there any rules? Is Zeus just allowed to do whatever he wants to whoever he wants? Because if the universe is just ruled by an all-powerful, jealous tyrant, it seems like the cosmos would just collapse into chaos.
That is a brilliant question. And it brings us to the ultimate constraint on divine power in the Greek system.
Okay.
The gods are not all-powerful. They are bound by a force called Moira.
Moira.
Moira translates to fate, or sometimes it's framed as a Nike, which means necessity.
Fate is an impersonal, immutable, cosmic force that supersedes absolutely everything.
Even the gods, even Zeus himself, the king of Mount Olympus, the hurler of thunderbolts, is completely powerless to alter fate.
I think the best illustration of this is the story of Sarpedon. When I first read this, it completely broke my understanding of Greek mythology. Because Sarpedon isn't just a random soldier, he is Zeus's own mortal son fighting on the side of the Trojans.
It is one of the most poignant and revealing moments in the Iliad.
Sarpedon's fighting on the battlefield, and according to the threads spun by the fates, he is destined to be killed by the Greek warrior Patroclus.
Zeus is watching this unfold from Mount Olympus. He loves Sarpedon dearly.
He is watching his own son about to be struck down in the prime of his life, and Zeus hesitates.
He holds the physical power of life and death. He turns to his wife, Hera, and he actually contemplates snatching Sarpedon away from the battlefield.
He thinks about scooping him up, saving his life, and teleporting him to safety in his homeland of Lycia.
And as the listener, you're thinking, do it. You're the king of the gods. If anyone can save their kid, it's you.
Right. He has the physical capability to do it.
But Hera stops him.
She doesn't stop him out of cruelty, but out of logic.
She reminds him that Sarpedon's death is dictated by Moira, by fate.
If Zeus, the supreme ruler of the cosmos, breaks the fundamental laws of fate just to save his own son, then what's to stop every other god from breaking the rules to save their mortal favorites?
The entire cosmic order would unravel. The universe would descend into lawless chaos.
Necessity dictates that Sarpedon must die so that the fabric of reality holds together.
And Zeus backs down.
He realizes she is right.
He is the most powerful being in the universe, yet he is utterly paralyzed by the constraints of cosmic law. He cannot save his own child.
All he can do, as Sarpedon is speared to death by Patroclus, is weep tears of blood that fall upon the earth in a bloody rain.
It's tragic.
I see the tragic beauty in that, but it also raises a massive practical problem. If I am an ancient Greek farmer or merchant, and I know that the gods are incredibly petty, they resent my success, and even worse, they can't even save the people they love because they are powerless against fate, what is the point of worshiping them?
That is the agonizing question.
Why am I spending my hard-earned money buying a bull to sacrifice to Zeus if Zeus is just going to look at the golden scales, shrug, and say, sorry, fate says you have to die today? Weren't they just middlemen you couldn't trust?
That is exactly what plagued ancient minds. If the gods are capricious, easily offended, and ultimately bound by an unfeeling fate, how do you actually manage your relationship with them?
You certainly can't trust their goodwill. You can't rely on their mercy.
So how do you survive?
Yeah.
To answer your question, we have to follow the trajectory of civilization westward.
Okay.
The Greeks gave us the beautiful, tragic poetry of divine indifference, but it was the Romans who came up with the highly practical, bureaucratic solution.
Because the Romans were engineers. They were practical people. They built roads, they built aqueducts.
And when they looked at this chaotic, emotional Greek religion, they basically said, this is too messy. We need to put this in writing. We need a contract.
Precisely. We are moving now from Greece across the Ionian Sea to Latium, present-day Italy.
Specifically focusing on the era of the Roman Republic, roughly 509 to 27 BCE.
The Roman solution to divine caprice was ingenious. They stripped away the emotional drama.
They largely ignored the poetic myths about the gods feasting on Olympus or weeping tears of blood.
Instead, they turned religion into a legally binding contract. They essentially hired lawyers for the soul.
I love this transition. Tell me how Roman religion actually functioned, because from what I understand, it was almost completely devoid of what we would call spiritual romance.
It was entirely devoid of spiritual romance. Early Roman religion was deeply focused on noumena.
Noumena. That's a fascinating concept.
It translates roughly to divine wills or divine forces.
These weren't necessarily the highly personalized, dramatic characters of Greek myth with complex backstories.
Noumena were often faceless, impersonal forces that operated within nature and within the civic life of the city.
There was a numen that controlled the flow of the river.
There was a numen that inhabited the boundary stones of a farm. There was even a numen for the doorway of a house.
So you weren't necessarily praying to a beautiful marble statue of Apollo and weeping at his feet.
No, you are essentially negotiating with the invisible spiritual electricity of the room.
Exactly. It's a negotiation with the forces of nature.
And the core mechanism for this negotiation is a concept every listener should know. Do it day.
It is Latin, and it translates literally to, I give so that you might give.
This was the bedrock of Roman piety, or PS. It was a strict transactional mechanism.
You provide a specific offering, a libation of wine, an animal sacrifice, a portion of the harvest.
And in return, the gods are contractually obligated to provide a specific benefit.
Or at the very least, they are obligated to refrain from destroying your crops or sending a plague.
If we're being honest, it sounds exactly like a mafia protection racket.
It really does. The Romans even had a name for it. The Pax Deorum, the peace with the gods.
The entire goal of Roman state religion was not to achieve personal spiritual enlightenment or to secure a happy afterlife.
No, it was simply to maintain the Pax Deorum so the state could survive and prosper.
The gods hold up their end of the bargain, we hold up ours, and nobody gets hurt.
And here is where we return to that concept we introduced at the very beginning of the deep dive. Orthopraxy, correct action.
Because if this is a legal contract, the gods don't care about your feelings, do they?
They do not care about your feelings at all. The Roman gods did not want your love.
They didn't care about your internal righteousness.
They certainly didn't care if your heart was pure or if you felt a deep, warm connection to them during the sacrifice.
They demanded flawless, robotic execution of rituals.
Let's talk about what flawless execution actually meant, because this blew my mind when I learned about it. What happens if a priest makes a mistake?
Because it's a legal contract, the ritual must be executed perfectly, down to the smallest syllable.
The Romans practiced a legal and religious concept called instauratio, which translates to restarting or renewal.
Imagine a Roman priest conducting a massive public sacrifice to Jupiter to secure the safety of the city before a military campaign.
It's a complex ceremony that takes hours. He has to recite archaic prayers, pour wine in a specific motion, and examine the liver of a bull.
If during this hours-long ceremony, the priest stutters on a single word of the prayer.
Or if he makes the wrong hand gesture.
Or even if a rat squeaks in the corner of the temple and disrupts the sacred silence.
The ritual was immediately considered legally invalid. The contract was void.
Because Jupiter is watching the paperwork and he sees a typo.
Exactly.
And what happens when the contract is void? Do they just apologize and pick up where they left off?
No. They had to stop, clean everything up, get a new sacrificial animal, and start the entire ceremony over from the very beginning.
From scratch.
From scratch. Because the noumena do not grade on a curve. They do not accept good intentions as a substitute for perfect execution.
There are historical records of Roman festivals being restarted 3, 4, even 5 times in a row because of minor technical infractions.
I was thinking about how to explain this to a modern listener, and I realized it is exactly like compiling computer code.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
If you are a software developer writing a program, you can have the purest, most beautiful intentions in your heart.
You can really, truly believe in the app you are building. You can love the code.
But if you miss one single semicolon on line 4,000 of the script, the compiler throws a syntax error.
The whole system crashes, and the program simply will not run.
The computer doesn't care about your feelings. The computer only cares about the semicolon.
In Roman religion, the numen is the computer, and it only cares about the semicolon.
I think taking that computer logic a step further really reveals the mindset of the Roman priest.
The priest isn't a prophet delivering moral sermons. The priest is a divine software engineer.
His job is to debug the ritual, to ensure the syntax of the sacrifice is perfect.
If it compiles without an error, the Pax Deorum is secured and the state is safe.
Your internal belief in the code doesn't matter. What matters is that the code runs.
But think about the incredible psychological toll this must have taken over centuries.
It's massive.
Imagine living your entire life in a world where you are constantly terrified of missing a semicolon.
You are terrified of accidentally offending a vain Greek deity who might ruin your life out of jealousy.
Or waking up a sleeping Mesopotamian manager.
Or voiding a Roman contract because a bird flew the wrong way during a prayer.
It sounds absolutely exhausting. The sheer psychological burden of trying to appease these indifferent, volatile powers must have been immense.
It was exhausting. And it's that profound exhaustion that sets the stage for a radical philosophical revolution.
People eventually snapped.
They were tired of the terror. They were tired of the massively expensive sacrifices. They were tired of the endless anxiety of the Pax Deorum.
They needed an escape strategy.
And they found it in philosophy, specifically during the Hellenistic period.
We're moving into the era roughly between 355 BCE. And there are two key figures we need to talk about who offer this escape hatch.
Yes. We need to look at Epicurus, a Greek philosopher who founded a school known as the Garden in Athens in the modern region of Attica, Greece.
And we also need to look at his later Roman interpreter, a poet and philosopher named Lucretius.
Right, who wrote a magnificent, world-changing text called De Rerum Natura, or On the Nature of Things, in Rome.
Together, they offered the ancient world the ultimate liberation from religious terror.
Okay, so what was their pitch? Because so far, the options for humanity have been dig ditches until you die, played like a pawn on a chessboard, or hire a divine lawyer and hope you don't stutter.
What does Epicurus offer that is so different?
Epicurus offers liberation through the concept of absolute, perfect divine apathy. Now, it's important to note that Epicurus did not deny that the gods exist. He wasn't an atheist in the modern sense.
He just fundamentally redefined where the gods are and what they actually care about.
Epicurus argued that the defining characteristic of a true god, by definition, must be perfection.
And perfection requires absolute bliss, serene tranquility, and total peace.
The Greek word he used for this state is Ataraxia.
Ataraxia, a state of being completely unbothered.
Correct. Serene, unbothered bliss.
Now, Epicurus poses a logical puzzle to his followers. If the gods truly exist in a state of perfect ataraxia, how could they possibly care about human beings?
Think about what it takes to govern the cosmos, to care about humanity, to listen to millions of prayers, to get angry when someone sins, to actively manage the weather.
To enforce the legal contracts of the Pax Deorum, that is work. That requires effort.
That causes anxiety and stress. If the gods are stressed out, they aren't perfect.
Therefore, logically, to maintain their divine peace, they must be completely and utterly indifferent to us.
They don't hate us. They don't love us. They literally do not interact with our existence.
Exactly. Epicurus theorized that the gods live in a place called the intermundia.
These are the empty spaces between the worlds, far removed from the physical, chaotic cosmos that we inhabit.
In the intermundia, the gods just exist in beautiful, luminous tranquility, conversing with each other, completely undisturbed by the suffering, the noise, or the desperate rituals of humanity.
But if you're an ancient Roman hearing this, you're going to ask the obvious question. If the gods aren't running the universe, who is?
Who makes the rivers flood? Who causes the plagues? Who throws the lightning bolts?
Epicurus and later Lucretius were atomists. This is where their philosophy gets remarkably modern.
They argued that the entire cosmos, the Earth, the stars, the weather, and even our own bodies and souls is just composed of microscopic, indivisible particles called atoms.
These atoms are just constantly falling and colliding randomly in an infinite void.
Everything that happens is just the result of these physical collisions. There is no divine architect pulling the strings.
There is no grand fate or Moira. There is no cosmic punishment waiting for you in the underworld.
When you die, the atoms that make up your body and your soul just gently disperse back into the void to form something else.
It's all just physics.
Now, to a modern listener, the idea that the universe is just random atomic collisions, that there is no God watching over us, and that our souls just dissolve into nothingness when we die.
That might sound deeply depressing. It sounds nihilistic.
But you have to view it through the lens of the ancient world.
To the ancient mind, this was not depressing. It was the exact opposite.
It was the greatest good news imaginable. It was a massive sigh of relief.
Think about everything we've discussed. If Epicurus is right, you don't have to be terrified of Enlil drowning your family for being too loud.
You don't have to fear Zeus orchestrating your downfall just because you had a successful harvest.
You don't have to bankrupt your family buying sacrificial bulls for the Roman state because you stuttered during a prayer.
Lucretius actually writes about this very vividly in his poem, doesn't he?
He does. Lucretius famously wrote a passage where he says that for centuries, human life lay foully groveling upon the earth, crushed beneath the terrifying weight of religion.
Religion was this monster looming in the sky, threatening humanity.
But Epicurean philosophy lifted our eyes. By using reason to prove that the universe is just atoms and that the gods do not care, they freed humanity from superstitious terror.
So, to save humanity from the crushing anxiety of religion,
He turned divine apathy into a self-care strategy.
don't worry, the gods aren't mad at you, they just have their cosmic phones on Do Not Disturb permanently.
A permanent cosmic do not disturb. And because the gods are unbothered, we should be unbothered too.
It allowed humans to focus on their own ataraxia, cultivating their own peaceful, quiet lives with their friends, enjoying simple pleasures, without constantly looking over their shoulders waiting for a lightning bolt to strike.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second. If I am a Roman senator, and the entire safety of my republic relies on the Pax Deorum, the peace with the gods, and suddenly Lucretius is running around telling everyone, hey, the gods don't care, stop worrying about the sacrifices, wouldn't the state view this as absolute treason?
If people stop doing the rituals, the contract is broken. Wouldn't the Romans crush the Epicureans?
That is the real-world friction of these ideas. You've hit on the exact tension.
Epicureanism was heavily criticized by more traditional Romans and rival philosophical schools like the Stoics.
They saw Epicureans as subversive precisely because they withdrew from public political life and undermined the urgency of the state cults.
But interestingly, Epicurus never told his followers to actively boycott the temples.
He essentially said, go to the festivals, perform the sacrifices, enjoy the community aspect of it. Just don't believe in your heart that the gods are actually listening.
Oh. So he was basically saying, go through the motions to keep the peace, but keep your internal peace by knowing it's all fake.
Which brings me to a massive realization as we've been talking through all of this, from the mud of Iraq to the atoms of Epicurus.
There's a glaring absence in everything we've discussed today.
We've been analyzing religion for almost an hour, and neither of us has used the word faith.
We haven't talked about belief.
Even when Epicurus tells them to fake it, the Roman state is fine with it. Nobody in the ancient world seemed to care what was actually in your heart.
And that realization is the central thesis of our deep dive. The ancient Mediterranean and Near Eastern worlds had absolutely no creeds.
Let's define that word carefully because it's so important.
A creed is a formalized, authoritative statement of belief.
Think of the modern Christian phrasing. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and so on.
A creed is a dogmatic boundary line.
In the ancient polytheistic world, there was no centralized religious authority, no pope, no central council demanding that you sign a metaphysical checklist affirming your internal beliefs.
This goes right back to the distinction between orthopraxy and orthodoxy that we talked about earlier. The question a Roman magistrate or a Greek priest asked a citizen was never, do you believe in the depths of your soul that Jupiter is the supreme, uncreated ruler of the cosmos?
The magistrate couldn't care less about your soul.
The question was always, did you show up to the civic festival, did you bring your offering, and did you pour the wine correctly?
Because religion wasn't a private, spiritual journey of self-discovery. It was a matter of civic integration. It was statecraft.
Religion and citizenship were entirely indistinguishable.
To be a citizen of Athens meant that you participated in the Panathenaic festival to honor Athena. It was your civic duty.
To be a Roman meant participating in the public cults.
The state didn't care what you thought in the privacy of your own mind, as long as your physical actions supported the public maintenance of the Pax Deorum.
If a terrible drought hit the city of Rome, the magistrates didn't go door to door looking for citizens who were harboring secret doubts about Jupiter in their hearts.
The failure was always in the action, not the thought.
My analogy for this ancient orthopraxy and how weird it feels to us is paying modern income taxes.
Think about the IRS in the United States, or any national tax authority.
The IRS does not send you a form requiring you to sign a confession of faith saying, I believe in my heart that the tax code is righteous, true, and just.
The IRS doesn't care if you secretly hate taxes. They don't care if you think the government is corrupt.
They only want two things. They want you to fill out the paperwork correctly, and they want you to pay the money.
Your actions matter. Your internal theology regarding the IRS is completely irrelevant to them.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. A Roman magistrate viewed the cult of Jupiter exactly like a modern auditor views the tax code.
Just file your spiritual taxes, perform the sacrifices, and the empire functions. The machinery keeps turning.
And because of that, it was actually a strangely tolerant society, intellectually speaking.
As long as you paid your spiritual taxes, you could think whatever you wanted. You could even write plays openly mocking the gods.
You absolutely could. In Athens, you have brilliant playwrights like Aristophanes writing comedies where the gods are portrayed as bumbling buffoons or cowards.
You have philosophers like Epicurus openly teaching that the gods do absolutely nothing. And they weren't burned at the stake as heretics.
Why? Because the myths themselves were fluid.
Homer's epics were revered as brilliant poetry and cultural touchstones, but they were not an infallible, closed scriptural canon.
There was no holy Bible of Zeus that had to be interpreted literally by everyone.
As long as Aristophanes or Epicurus still paid their temple taxes and didn't disrupt the public sacrifices, they were free to speculate.
There's also this incredible concept of how they handled encountering foreign religions. Because polytheism is open-ended, right?
If you already believe in many gods, what happens when your empire expands? You travel to a new country and you meet their gods. Do you start a holy war?
Rarely for purely theological reasons. They engage in a practice called interpretatio.
Let's look at Interpretatio Romana. When the Romans expanded their empire and arrived in Egypt, they didn't look at the great Egyptian temples to the god Amun and say, that is a false demon, your religion is a lie, we must destroy this temple.
Instead, they practiced interpretatio. They looked at Amun, the king of the Egyptian gods, the ruler of the sky, and they said, we know this guy, that's just Jupiter. You Egyptians just call him Amun and draw him a bit differently, but it's the same divine force.
It's just regional branding. We call him Jupiter, you call him Amun, but we're all talking about the same guy in the sky.
Exactly. It is profound translatability. Because polytheistic gods didn't generally claim exclusive truth over the entire universe. They had specific domains, specific cities, specific forces of nature. There was no need to build defensive dogmatic walls.
If your truth isn't exclusive, you don't need a creed to define exactly who is in and who is out based on theology. You just integrate the new gods into your existing ritual framework. You add them to the pantheon.
But obviously, the world we live in today is not like that. We live in a world defined by faith, by belief, by meticulously defining who has the correct doctrine and who is a dangerous heretic.
If ancient Mediterranean life was entirely based on actions, rituals, fluid myths, and translating gods across borders, how did we get here? Where did the Great Shift happen?
To understand the Great Shift, we have to look away from Greece and Rome and turn our attention back to the ancient Near East, specifically to the Levant.
The region of modern Israel, Palestine, and the surrounding areas.
Here, a profound counter-narrative had been developing for centuries. Ethical monotheism.
This is the tradition recorded in the Hebrew scriptures, and it fundamentally subverts almost everything we've talked about so far.
Let's contrast it directly with the Mesopotamian labor paradigm we started with. In the Enuma Elish and the Atrahasis, humans were created out of the bloody mud of a slaughtered rebel god to be slaves to dig canals.
How does the Hebrew text handle the creation of humanity?
It is a radical departure. In the book of Genesis, human beings are not created as an afterthought.
They were not a scab workforce manufactured to relieve exhausted deities.
Instead, they are created deliberately, and most importantly, they are created bearing the imago Dei, the image of God.
They are given stewardship and dominion over the earth, not a labor yoke. The divine being in the Hebrew text is utterly self-sufficient. He requires no food, no sustenance, no maintenance from humans.
And the flood story. We talked about how Enlil drowns the world because the humans are too noisy.
The biblical flood story, the story of Noah, looks structurally very similar on the surface. A guy builds a boat, saves animals, survives a deluge, but the motivation for the flood is radically different.
The motivation changes the entire nature of the divine. In the Genesis account, the flood is not triggered by the petty irritation of noise.
It is triggered by moral corruption, systemic violence, and the cruelty of humanity toward one another.
God's response is not a manager's annoyance. It is profound moral grief.
This is a massive theological leap. The idea that the creator of the cosmos is intimately, deeply concerned with the ethical behavior of humanity.
It's a huge leap. But even with that ethical covenant, even with a God who cares about justice and morals, the ancient Israelites still struggled with that existential tension, didn't they?
Because they still look up at the stars and realize how tiny and fragile they are.
Yes, the sheer scale of the cosmos still induced awe and a sense of insignificance. You see this beautifully articulated in Hebrew poetry.
I want to share a translation of Psalm 8 because it perfectly captures this existential paradox that both the Greeks and the Hebrews felt.
The poet looks up at the night sky and writes, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you care for him?"
It's the exact same question Epicurus was asking. Why would the architect of the universe possibly care about a speck of dust?
But Epicurus concluded, he doesn't. He's in the void. The psalmist concludes, incredibly defying all logic, he does care.
Exactly. It is a radical assertion of divine providence and love. But we have to be careful here. Even in this early Hebrew tradition, religion was still heavily orthopractic.
It was based on the covenant, the law, keeping the Sabbath, performing the temple sacrifices in Jerusalem. Action was still paramount.
The true world-altering pivot from action to belief, the invention of the creed as the central defining pillar of religion, doesn't fully solidify until late antiquity.
Late antiquity. We are talking roughly 300 to 600 CE. Set the stage for us. What is happening in the world during this period that makes creeds suddenly necessary?
The world is undergoing massive structural collapse and transformation.
The traditional localized city-states of the ancient world have been swallowed up by massive multi-ethnic empires, primarily the Roman Empire.
The old civic cults, tied to specific local geography like the numen of a specific river or a local temple, are losing their meaning as people are displaced and mixed together.
People are searching for universal truths that transcend local geography.
This period sees the rise of universalizing exclusivist religions, most notably Christianity, and later Islam.
And the key word there is exclusivist.
Yes. Unlike polytheism, which happily practiced interpretatio and equated Amun with Jupiter, Christianity claimed that there was only one true, universal God, and that salvation depended on a specific, exclusive relationship with him through Jesus Christ.
If truth is singular and exclusive, then suddenly the boundary markers of your community aren't geographic anymore, they are ideological.
Right. If I can't just define my community by saying we all live in Athens and we all pour wine at the festival, I have to define it by saying we all believe the exact same metaphysical reality about the universe.
Precisely. And this ideological boundary making reached a fever pitch in the early 4th century.
Roman Emperor Constantine had recently legalized Christianity. He wanted this new, dynamic religion to serve as a unifying cultural glue for his vast fracturing empire.
But there was a massive problem. The Christians themselves were fiercely, sometimes violently, debating the precise metaphysical nature of Jesus.
Was he fully divine? Was he created by God? Was he co-eternal with the Father?
And if you are a Roman emperor trying to hold an empire together, you cannot have your unifying religion fracturing into civil war over theological technicalities.
Exactly. Constantine needs a single, standardized answer. So in the year 325 CE, Constantine convenes the Council of Nicaea, located in modern-day Iznik, Turkey.
He gathers Christian bishops from across the empire, locks them in a room, and basically says, hammer out a standardized formula, figure out exactly what we believe.
And they do. They write a document that explicitly defines the metaphysical nature of God. This document becomes the Nicene Creed.
The word creed comes directly from the Latin word credo, meaning I believe.
This is the moment the paradigm completely flips.
This is the hinge of history. The creed became an instrument of both spiritual salvation and imperial standardization.
You now had to believe the correct things to be saved, and you had to believe the correct things to be a good citizen of the Christian Roman Empire.
And with the invention of the creed, we get the invention of its dark mirror, heresy.
Heresy, the ultimate crime of the mind.
In the old Roman system, the primary danger to the state was a priest stuttering during a ritual, a failure of physical action.
Now, the primary danger to the state and to the eternal soul was harboring incorrect doctrine, a failure of belief.
Orthodoxy officially conquered orthopraxy in the West. If you held the wrong beliefs, you weren't just making a mistake, you were a heretic, a danger to the cosmos.
That is wild to think about. The ultimate sin went from you didn't perform the physical sacrifice right to you have the wrong thoughts inside your head.
But wait, before we leave a listener with the impression that orthopraxy just died at the Council of Nicaea and vanished from the earth, that's not actually true, is it? We're really just talking about the Western Christianized trajectory.
That is a vital clarification, and I'm glad you brought it up. Orthopraxy did not die. In fact, it remains the absolute bedrock of almost every other major global religious tradition outside of creedal Christianity.
Give us some examples of how that works, because we need to see how the rest of the world maintained this ancient focus on action over pure belief.
Let's look at Judaism first. Following the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem by the Romans in 70 CE, Judaism could no longer practice the physical temple sacrifices that define their orthopraxy.
Did they invent a rigid creed to replace it?
No. The rabbis codified the Halakha. Halakha translates roughly to the walking or the path.
It is a comprehensive legal and ethical system dictating daily behavior dietary laws, like kosher, Sabbath observance, and ethical action toward others.
In Judaism, you belong to the covenant because of how you walk the path, how you act in the world, not simply because you assent to a dogmatic theological checklist.
And Islam is similar in its focus on action.
Very similar. In Islam, you have Sharia and fiqh, which is Islamic jurisprudence.
The absolute core of Muslim life is the 5 pillars, praying 5 times a day, fasting during the month of Ramadan, giving alms to the poor. These are physical, measurable actions.
Even the profession of faith, the Shahada, is fundamentally viewed as an action you perform.
And if we move further east to traditions like Hinduism and Confucianism, do we see the same thing?
Absolutely. In Hinduism, the central organizing principle is dharma, right duty. It is about right action based on your stage of life and your societal role. It's about performing your duties correctly to maintain cosmic balance.
And in China, Confucianism is built almost entirely on the concept of li, which translates to ritual propriety or correct etiquette.
Confucius explicitly taught that you don't become a good person by just believing good things in your heart. You become a good person by meticulously practicing correct behavior, respecting your elders, and honoring social rituals until that external goodness becomes internalized.
So what you are telling me is that creedal Christianity, with its obsessive focus on correct belief, orthodoxy, and defining who is a heretic based on their internal thoughts, is actually the historical outlier.
For most of human history, and in most global religions today, you belong to a community because of how you walk the path, not because you signed off on a metaphysical checklist.
Historically and globally speaking, yes. The intense, almost exclusive prioritization of orthodoxy over orthopraxy is a specific historical development.
It was born out of the political and theological pressures of the Roman Empire in late antiquity.
Okay, let's pull all the threads together because we have covered an immense amount of ground today, spanning thousands of years and multiple continents.
We started into the baking mud of ancient Iraq, discovering that humanity was originally conceived as a surrogate workforce, a biological Roomba, manufactured just to dig canals and feed a bunch of tired, irritable deities who ultimately tried to drown us simply for being too loud.
We then moved to the Aegean, where the Olympian gods viewed us not as necessary laborers, but as fragile mayflies' pawns, whose suffering was completely irrelevant to their banquets, and whose success was dangerous enough to provoke divine jealousy and ruin.
From there, we watched the Romans try to manage that terrifying divine volatility by turning religion into a strict, unfeeling legal contract. Here's the sacrifice, keep the peace, and whatever you do not miss a semicolon in the prayer.
Which naturally led to the psychological exhaustion of the ancient world, prompting philosophers like Epicurus to propose the most comforting thought imaginable at the time. The gods are perfect, therefore they exist in a void, entirely unbothered by and indifferent to our existence.
And finally, we saw the great pivot. The rise of ethical monotheism, the collapse of the localized ancient world, the Council of Nicaea, and the exact moment a Roman emperor decided that what you do matters less than what you believe, giving birth to the world of creeds and heresy that profoundly shapes Western thinking to this very day.
It is a phenomenal, sweeping evolution of human thought. We moved from trying to avert the unpredictable wrath of nature through physical action to meticulously policing the boundaries of the human mind.
It really is.
And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over, building on everything we've just discussed. Look around at our modern culture today. Think about our politics, our social media landscape, the endless, exhausting culture wars we fight every single day.
We don't live in ancient Rome, and most of us aren't debating the exact metaphysical nature of the Trinity like they did at the Council of Nicaea.
But look at how we treat each other. Are we actually becoming more orthodox in the worst sense of the word? Think about it. We spend so much energy obsessively policing what people believe.
We demand they state the correct opinions online, we search for ideological purity, and we eagerly cast out modern heretics who say the wrong words or hold the wrong thoughts.
We prioritize the creed in someone's Twitter bio over almost everything else.
But what would happen if we brought a little bit of ancient orthopraxy back into how we judge a good life?
What if, instead of judging people by the ideological creed they claim to hold, we judge them purely by what they actually do? How do they treat their neighbors? How do they walk the path when no one is looking?
If we stopped worrying quite so much about policing what's inside people's heads and focused entirely on the tangible actions of their hands, would we be better off?